Southwest on the A303 by Adam Gary. Chapter 1. Uncle Bill. My mum's arm wrapped around me and she asked if I needed anything. No thanks, I said, sitting blankly on the side of my bed.
Why don't you go out? Isn't Harry around?
She asked gently, sitting down next to me. I shook my head. There wasn't much to do these days and everything was a drag.
Well, I'll do something with you.
Mum pestered. I appreciated the effort, but I was very content with staying in my room reading or watching television. The truth is, I didn't find anything in life exciting anymore, and that wasn't because my uncle had just passed away. I remember the moment I got the news. I remember it so vividly, in fact, it still keeps me up at night as I relive it over and over, being forced to feel that dark, sinking feeling again and again, completely overshadowing how I felt when I tried to remind myself of the good times. I'd say I had a unique relationship with Uncle Bill. Technically, he wasn't my uncle, he was actually my second cousin, but this was so much easier. I looked up to him like a father, and I had the utmost respect for him. He was everything I so desperately wanted to be. Smart, collected, calm, talented beyond belief. An amazing guitar player and bassist, lucky enough to grow up through the 60s and 70s. He used to run security for music venues, and the stories he would tell me about him and his faithful guard dog Rambo were just insane. How he had threatened to lock Ronnie Wood in the Hammersmith Odeon one night after a Stones concert because Ronnie had been partying past curfew. Or how he'd set up stage for Jimi Hendrix in a small pub in Hounslow before Hendrix became Hendrix. Once we finished setting up, he said, we just pissed off to the pub. To us he was just another guitar player at the time. So casual about the whole thing. If only I'd stuck around. The truth is, Bill was full of stories like that, some of which I'm not even allowed to mention. One of my favourite memories of our time together came in the winter of 2011. I was 19 years old and didn't really know what I was doing in life. I just knew that I wanted to create and to be an actor on the stage, which my uncle supported wholeheartedly, by the way. And I certainly hadn't discovered any individuality within myself. I had an idea of what I liked and who I wanted to be, but no clue how to get there. Uncle Bill invited me to go spend some time with him and soul search. I boarded the train from Reading to Parr, a quiet town in Cornwall, excited to spend the next week and a half relaxing, hanging out with Bill, and just being away from the city. We had of course spoken on the phone a week before, to organise the logistics and such, when Bill drifted off into one of his great stories. He was telling me about his time as a kid growing up in Chiswick, running around mischievously and then racing back home to watch his favourite television programme, Quatermass, which of course I now had to watch. When I finally got to his bungalow in Parr, I made my way inside, and in the middle of his living room sat two plastic boxes filled to the brim with films like Creature from the Black Lagoon and Dracula, Monroe films, Brando films, Dean films, you name it, he had it. Heaven. By the end of that week and a half, I had seen my first Brando film and had been introduced to both James Dean and Marilyn Monroe. In fact, not only had I been introduced to them, I had seen their entire collection of work. And of course the mighty Quatermass didn't disappoint either. On top of all those films, he had recorded hours upon hours of music documentaries off the television from BBC4. I had also been introduced to his music collection, which included Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, all the while sharing a few Jack Daniels and Coke together. Needless to say, that week and a half changed my life and I left feeling I'd found my path. So you can imagine how I felt when I received the news last week that Uncle Bill had passed away. It had come so suddenly and hit me with a terrible force. Mum's been on the phone constantly, notifying family and making funeral arrangements, whilst I've been unable to do much but sit in my room, desperately trying to relive that golden week. I helped Mum out where I could, with certain information including getting an oversized urn which Bill had previously expressed he wanted, in order to mix his ashes with Rambo's. Bill was a lone wolf, and I have a feeling that if he had his way, he wouldn't even bother with a funeral. He'd probably be happy to drift away silently, sliding into obscurity as if he hadn't even graced the earth with his presence. He couldn't stand attention, unless it was coming from the opposite sex. Then he would be as smooth as Don Juan himself. I continued to sit on the side of my bed, as my little West Highland Terrier looked up at me with her sweet, big, innocent brown eyes. I gave her a pat on the head and smiled. She obviously saw this as an invitation to leap up onto the bed beside me and lay down, tucking herself up and quickly falling asleep as she usually did. In a few hours, Mum was expecting Bill's lawyer round to go through the will with us and discuss formalities. It's funny, isn't it, that men in suits can find ways to slime into your life, charging for their services no matter what the circumstance. Damn, humans have complicated life. I wasn't entirely sure whether I was ready to go through his last wishes just yet. Maybe it's because I wanted to forget the fact that he had left us, or maybe it was because it would feel like he hadn't left us after all. I guess I wasn't really sure what I wanted to feel. Still, time waits for no man, and sure enough the afternoon came quickly, followed shortly with a knock on our door. He was actually a really kind gentleman, sensitive to how we were feeling, and approached his work slowly and with great care. A few hours went by and I learnt that I'd pretty much been left with everything, including his bungalow, and was given the keys to the door on the spot. Just like that. The lawyer got to his feet, wished us well and left. Days went by, and Mum had made all the arrangements for the funeral, which was to take place in Par 2 weeks from now, and had somehow managed to contact all of Bill's friends that he hadn't seen for more than 8 years.
Alex!
I heard her cry.
Alex! Get out here quick.
I jumped up thinking something terrible had happened and raced into the living room. Out of the window I could see an old but shiny light olive green Volkswagen Campervan being lowered from a tow truck and onto the side of the street. "What's that doing here?" I asked, surprised to see it in London and not parked on Bill's driveway down in Cornwall. Apparently he had requested one of his neighbours to have it delivered to me within his will. A rough, dirty-looking mechanic approached the door and asked me to sign for the van. Of course I obliged, before he disappeared off down the road and into his truck, presumably heading back to Cornwall. I walked out onto the side of the road and looked the van over. Bill had always kept good care of it as it was a passion of his. The van was a Brazilian import of the old VW Campers and was the closest he could get to the ones Volkswagen made back in the 70s. He used to own one back then and, of course, had many stories to go along with it, some of them being hilariously explicit, which resulted in his friends nicknaming him Tinkler. After I had a good look around the outside, I noticed there was an envelope sitting on the driver's seat. Curious, I unlocked the van and pulled it out. Quickly opening it, there was a letter tucked inside on a small piece of notepad paper. "This story's on me." I stood frozen a moment. I was confused. I didn't know what to make of the note. I felt my insides swell. I looked up at the van, which sat in all her beautiful glory, and turned back as my mum peered out of the doorway.
Come inside. I've got something to give you,
she said excitedly, with a smile on her face as if she had planned this whole thing out with Bill in advance. I walked back inside, clutching the note, and sat down on the sofa, dumbstruck, with my mum next to me. "What's this?" I asked innocently, as she handed me yet another envelope.
It's from Bill,
she said, with a sweet look in her eyes, eager for me to open the letter. I looked out of the window as the van sat silently on the street, then gently ripped open the envelope. "Alex, I'd like to take this time to let you know how I feel. You know I find it hard to express myself, but you should know that I think you're all right. It's been nice getting to know you, though it was later in life. We made the best of it. We're both very alike, you and me, you know that. But you're a man now, and you need to pull yourself together, alright? Stop moping about alone in your room, feeling sorry for yourself and daydreaming all the time. Go enjoy the world. You'll get no pity from me. If you want stories of your own, you need to venture out. Keep up the hard work with your acting. I reckon you've got what it takes. Get to America and say hi to Marilyn for me. Bill." I sat stunned for a moment.
You have 2 weeks until the funeral,
came my mother. "What do you mean?"
Take the van and drive down to Cornwall. Meet us there,
she replied with a gentle, nudging smile. "I," was all I could muster. It all came on me a bit too quick and I didn't know what to say.
You need to get out of the house, Alex. I'm fed up seeing you so miserable all the time. You've got 2 weeks to take the van and do what you like. Just make sure you get to the funeral."
"But I don't even know what I would do," I countered, desperately trying to find a way out. The truth is, I'd feel far more comfortable sitting in my room until the day of the funeral than just driving it down there the night before. I don't have the money, suddenly grasping at the financial burden of such a trip.
Your dad and I will help you where we can. Stop looking for excuses and just go.
She generously offered.
Just worry about getting there safely and on time.
I sat staring at the van, a faint sense of excitement bubbling in my stomach. I didn't have the foggiest idea what to do. Eventually I got up and made for my room. I stood for a moment, staring at the two of Bill's notes before an uproar of adrenaline struck me and I decided that I was going to do this. I packed a few outfits and the travelling essentials before quickly shoving it into a large camping backpack that I'd bought a few years ago, in the hopes I would take up camping. I picked up an A to Z map, phone charger and a few good books. I felt anxious but pumped. I was about to take Bill's old camper down to Cornwall and I had no idea what I'd do when I got there. All I knew was that I was going to take the famous A303 that Bill always spoke about and enjoyed driving whenever he visited us. And just like that, I slung the backpack over my shoulder, cuddled my mum and dog farewell, yanked up the keys to the van and set off in search of the nearest petrol station.